Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Skip Allen, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where myself and some guests talk about a topic. Could be an actor, could be an actress, could be a genre, could be a director. This week, in honor of A Quiet Place 2, I decided to do indie horror movies. We haven't really done a horror topic, really, unless you count Universal Monsters, but I guess, that's kind of monsters. It's horror, but it's monsters too. But like I always say, I can't do this show by myself. So I got some good guests this evening. One new guest and one returning guest. Mr. Hunter Chambliss, how you doing this evening, buddy? I was on your show. Now you're on my show.
Yep, and as you see, Horror Guru is my parentheses name. I love all things horror. And he brought up indie horror movies. I was like, yes, please. This is going to be so much fun.
And my good buddy, it seems like my regular guy on here, and he's been on here for quite a bit of different topics because he's very knowledgeable in so many different movie topics. Mr. Jeremy Adams, welcome back, buddy.
Hey, I'm so glad to be back here. Yeah, I don't know. Somewhere along the way of me being in these leagues and being on different shows, I feel like people haven't realized that horror is like one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite genre. So, I got to do whatever I can to show how much I love horror. I played in a trivia match for Halloween last year and did really well on that. So I'm back, and this is a really great topic we have today, and it was really tough coming up with the list because I love quite a lot of movies in this topic. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I came up with a kind of a system to try to break it down to 5. It's going to be something.
Well, I love horror movies too, Jeremy. The problem is I just don't get scared. So unless it's something new,
I don't get scared either, but I appreciate them.
I do appreciate it. And I'll tell you what, the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a renaissance of horror. And that's what I love. I love new and interesting, new kinds of way they do horror movies instead of the same old tropes over and over again, which got kind of so like you just got sick of them. But lately, we got some new directors, some new people that have really influxed some energy in this genre. Maybe we'll get that with romantic comedies soon. But that's another because that genre is just dying a slow death right now, I think, Jeremy. But let's not talk about all this other stuff. Let's keep going here, Mr. Hunter. What is your number 5?
All right, so going through this whole list was hard. I have like 5 or 6 honorable mentions, but I'm gonna go with one that terrified me when I was younger because it was so real. I'm going 2008's The Strangers. Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman.
I do not have that on my list. I have it in my honorable mention. Hunter. Jeremy, do you have that on your list?
I don't have it, and I'll have things to say, but let Hunter speak his piece.
Yeah, I'm just glad you brought it up. When you only have 5, you say, thank God someone else brought something up so we could talk about it because it is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I absolutely love The Strangers. I think the whole idea of a home invasion has been used before, but the way that the director used the closed-in shots and the fact that he used camera angles where you didn't see the intruders until like the end of the movie and you saw little silhouettes in the background, the way he used those kind of effects where it's like, oh, I saw that, but did anyone else see it? It plays tricks in your mind, and the fact that it's so real. And I don't get scared normally in horror movies, but this one kind of creeped me out because, 2 people are home alone, you think you're safe, and then boom, something like that happens. Truly, I mean, it's well done. It's not one of the best horror movies, but to me, it's definitely one of the best indie ones out there.
Jeremy, what do you have to say about The Strangers?
I think a lot of this comes to, your personal experience with the movies. And Hunter said, he was much younger, a younger guy when he saw this, and it left a big impression on him. Unfortunately, I didn't see it till like a year or so ago. I just had never caught up with it, and it didn't really do a lot for me. Maybe it's just because a lot of movies have come since that have done similar things. And there's actually another home invasion movie that I'm going to mention in my honorable mentions that I think works a lot better for me. So I'm not a big fan of this movie, but I definitely can kind of see, how it's made an impact and a lot of people, there's a fan base for it.
And I will say that the first Strangers, I really enjoyed, and I thought it was just something different. And then I saw the second Strangers.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
that looked
god!
bad.
horrible.
They just took this interesting concept and just threw it right down the toilet, and it just. I'm like, come on, man. The Strangers was interesting, and then they just destroyed it with the second one. So I did like the first Strangers, and I had it in my honorable mentions, Hunter. So good 5, good choice for number 5. Jeremy, what is your number 5?
Well, like I said, I was looking at all these movies. I had like easily 20 movies that are indie that I love in this genre, and I had to figure out how I was going to break it down. And I decided to do it by time period. Like, I'm just going to take one specific time period, pick one movie that I think best exemplarizes that. And so for my number 5, it is going to be the modern era, like post 2000. And it was a really tough choice. There's a couple I kind of went with, but this movie, it has so much going on. It's the one I landed on. We'll see if you guys have it on your list. It is 2018's Hereditary.
Yep, I have it.
All right,
my buddy.
So we'll come back to it.
All right. My number 5 is a movie that I saw very recently, maybe like late last year, and I was absolutely blown away by this movie. I'm a big fan of foreign films, and I'll tell you what, a lot of times we get so spoiled by our own movies in this country, we don't realize that there are filmmakers all over the world that make movies, and sometimes they make them in other languages. And I saw a movie very recently that I absolutely loved. It was called A Girl Walks Home at Night Alone. And it's an Iranian film, and it's about a girl who befriends a vampire. And it's black and white, and it is a great if you like vampire movies, if you like black and white movies, if you just want to see something different, this is the movie for you. It really surprised me how enjoyable, because how many times can you see a vampire movie? It's like there's so many of them, but yet they're not like original. But this one is original. It's interesting. Like I said, it's Iranian. It's an Iranian film, and I really, really enjoyed this movie. Hunter, have you seen A Girl Walks Home at Night?
I have not, but I have it on my list now.
Say that again?
I said I have not seen it, but I have it on my list now. It's definitely what I'm going to watch.
Jeremy, have you seen A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night?
I actually haven't caught up with this movie yet. I definitely have heard about it, and I've been wanting to see it. For me, even before you mentioned it, it really sounded great from what I've heard about it. I just wanted to say, I personally, in coming up with this list, decided not to include foreign horror movies because, I had just going with American movies. I had like a list of 20. If you add foreign onto that, it's going to be like 60 or 70. So I feel like, that I was going to kind of save those. Possibly we could do just foreign movies as their own because there's so many great.
Yeah.
They really, some of the great, you go to Japan, South Korea, and then
like
even
Rangers.
to France.
Yeah,
even I left off like England. Like even go to, they got some tremendous horror films from all over the world. So I feel like that's a whole other thing, other than just kind of the American independent horror.
I guess I kind of.
Well, but that's fine. It's your list, Dan. I'm just saying for me, like I easily could have bumped off 2 that I have for a couple really great foreign films, but I just decided to separate that.
I don't know, man. I just kind of had a feeling like where I want to talk about this. I love it so much.
Totally fair.
Yeah. The way that you, Dan, like worded this movie, I thought you were talking about Parasite, and I was like,
no,
that's not horror.
I can see.
No, I wouldn't put Parasite on a list of horror movies.
And by the way, the 2 greatest vampire movies I've ever seen are foreign movies: Nosferatu, the original, and Let the Right One In. So if you're talking about great vampire movies, good. There's 2 great, basically indie movies right there. But like I said, that's a different list for me.
Yeah, no, you're right. We'll get to vampires down the line. We'll get to foreign horror. I don't know why. I just love this movie.
No, you're good. You're totally good.
So I just figured out what the hell I'm going to talk about it. Hunter, we're back to you with number 4.
All right, my number 4 is a horror movie that I watched late one night on Netflix. Didn't know what it was, ended up really loving it. It's called It Follows.
Yeah, I have it on my honorable mentions. Jeremy, do you have it?
I do not have that one.
I have it in my honorable mentions, Hunter. So go ahead, man. A very good movie, right?
It Follows is so unique, from the music to the actual story. Everything about this movie is so fun, but it's so scary. It's a really weird mix of, like, the music is incredible. The story about, like, haunted STD, pretty much. You have sex, you pass it along. This demon follows you. Very unique storytelling. The acting is really, really good. And the unique scares that they try to use, it wasn't all jump scares. There was very rarely any jump scares in this movie. It was more psychological, where it's like you see something walk behind you, or you see something off in the distance. They used real camera work to, kind of like with The Strangers, to trick your mind into thinking that something was there, and you see something coming, but you're not sure where it is. And they have a Thing vibe too, where, it's kind of this woman, she's everywhere. It's very unique, very interesting, very fun, and just a horror movie that stuck with me, and I keep watching every year on Halloween.
Jeremy, you got any thoughts on It Follows?
This is one that I understand that this has a major following. It made a big impact when it came out. Like Hunter said, it's a very unique premise. We've never seen a movie quite like this before, and they're telling a horror movie on a very low budget in a very unique way by having a cool premise to do that. It just, unfortunately, I don't know what it was. This movie did nothing for me. It seems like I should love it. It's got an 80s vibe. It's got a cool premise. I just found it like basically like inert, like just a very like slow, just not a very energized movie. It didn't work for me personally. But I can't. Somebody that enjoys it really latches onto it. I can't take it away from them. And the lead and the it latched onto a lot of people and followed them around, just not me. But I do have to give it up for Micah Monroe. I think she's a great lead actress. She's also great in the movie The Guest, and I'm hoping we'll see more of her, because she's a real talent and one of the best things about this movie for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I really enjoyed it. It Follows, but the thing that I loved about it is that you never seen something like this before. And this is the movie. When I talked about the horror genre coming back, having a renaissance, it was this movie that really brought the horror genre back from the doldrums, because it was a concept you had never seen before, and it was something different. It wasn't the greatest movie of all time, no, but it was different. It kept you interested when you were watching it. And then we got a lot of really good, interesting horror movies after this, years following. And so that's the one good thing about It Follows. It really is kind of like the beginning of the renaissance of the indie horror genre, or the horror genre as a whole. So I really enjoyed It Follows. All right, Jeremy, what is your number 4?
All right, well, for my number 4, I'm going to go, the next subcategory I have is 80s. And as anyone knows me at all, 80s is very close to my heart. I have a team that I play with in trivia. Our name is Team 80s. So 80s movies, this is the decade when I really first started watching and loving films. So it's very close to my heart. And this was, all of these were tough decisions. So picking one 80s movie was really tough. There's like 3 or 4 that I easily could have. But I decided to go with the one that I really feel is the most influential and changed the genre forever. And that is Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead. Do you guys have that on your list? Okay, cool. All right. So this movie was made by a group of like basically local filmmakers in Michigan. This guy, Sam Raimi, and his buddies, and they're like, hey, let's try to make a horror movie. And they made it with their buddies, and the lead actor was their friend from college. His name's Bruce Campbell, who's kind of become a legend in the kind of campy movies and horror movies and largely from this franchise that was launched. And they made this movie, and it was homemade, and they even did a little claymation on their own for one part of it. And it was just these scrappy guys making this movie, and they came up with kind of a cinematic technique where they just took a camera and put it on a board and pulled the board around the woods and then sped up the film. So you have this effect of it's from the point of view of this demon, and it's circling around the cabin cabin and going into the woods, and it's this propulsive sort of thing that you really never seen before. And like you said with It Follows, it's just we got to come up with stuff. We don't have any money. We've got to come up with visual techniques and new ideas to try to make something scary and interesting. And yeah, so then they made this movie. They played it like a local drive-in for their friends, and just gradually it started picking up steam. It got some, company bought it, and eventually, 3-4 years later, it got a big release and became this phenomenon that horror fans really latched onto, and it had a great sequel, a few years later. And for me, it's not my favorite, horror movie ever, but it is my favorite in the sense that it is so ambitious and bold, and it's got a sense of, you look at like a lot of this, we're coming out of the 70s, and a lot of the 70s horror is like very depressing and cynical and everything's bad. Like in 78, we had the Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake, and that is a very bleak, we're screwed, the humanities the horror movies had that. And here comes a horror movie that's almost like a cartoon. It almost feels like a Looney Tunes cartoon at times. It has a totally different vibe. It's fun. It's crazy. There's stuff you've never seen and didn't think you would ever see, like a tree violating a woman. Like, who even comes up with something like that? And yeah, it's for 80s horror. I think this is the one that you kind of have to single out, although there are a couple others that I love as well.
Hunter, you got any thoughts on The Evil Dead?
This might get me booted out of here. Forgive me, Jeremy, but I watched the original Evil Dead, and I just couldn't get into it. Now, I love Bruce Campbell, and I think Evil Dead 2 is a better version of the original Evil Dead. It's pretty much Evil Dead, just done on a better camera with a little bit of money behind it. The first one, though, I couldn't get behind it. I don't know why. Maybe it was me watching it with younger eyes and then just seeing like
I said, it's a lot of it is, your own experience with the movie. Yeah. I would say maybe try giving it another chance sometimes. Like the scene where blood keeps spraying on Bruce Campbell, and it's like there's a blood spatter on him, and then it's like, oh man, you've seen that in a lot of horror movies, but then it happens again, and then it happens again, and then it just keeps happening. It's like you can really, if you watch it again, you kind of start to latch onto these crazy little things that you might appreciate the movie in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the boat of Hunter. I wasn't the biggest fan of The Evil Dead. I liked Army of Darkness better. Yeah. And I did watch the TV show on Star.
The Evil Dead.
Yeah. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I saw of the TV show on Stars. I don't know. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But I do understand that it has a huge following of and a lot of people are huge Evil Dead and Army of Darkness fans, and so I cannot deny that it is one of those movies that a lot of people love.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, I'm going to go to my number 4, and like I said, if anybody has this, just say hold on, whatever. Last year we had a movie that absolutely blew me away. I was shocked how incredible this movie was. From the very moment it started, it was like you had a jaw-dropping moment. And the name of the movie is called Midsommar.
Yep, hold.
Don't have it.
Hunter's got that. Okay, we're going to skip back to Hunter, it looks like, since Hunter. What number is you? Because mine is that. You got that.
Hunter, we're at 3 with Hunter now.
Yeah, we're at number 3 with me.
So is Midsommar at number 3 or higher?
It's higher on my list, actually.
Right, never mind then. Okay, talk about your number 3 then.
But number 3 is another Ari Aster film. It's his first horror film, Hereditary.
All right, mine. I have it at 3 as well, and you had it at 5. So we all can talk about it now.
Okay. You start, Hunter. Yeah.
I was blown away by this movie. I've heard a lot of great things about it before going into it, but again, I kept my expectations pretty low, and I walked out of it and freaking loving this movie, man. The acting alone is incredible. And then you talk about the overall story and how confusing it is and how it's confusing for your characters, and you fall for this family who, man, nothing goes right with this family. This has to be the most unluckiest family ever. And then I'm guessing we're allowed to spoil.
Yeah, oh yeah. Movie
when the daughter dies, gets her head
decapitated.
Yeah.
That shook the hell out of me because I wasn't expecting that. And just
no one was.
No. Ari Aster is a beautiful, like, has beautiful cinematography when it comes to things like that. And the way that he is able to move the camera around and make you feel like something is watching you and making you feel like the rooms are like closing in on each other. That's great storytelling. That's a great director behind the camera.
Jeremy?
Yeah, like I said, I basically had an entire almost 2 decades to choose one movie from, and the movie that I chose was Hereditary. I think that it takes a lot of great ideas from previous horror films. If you go back to movies like Rosemary's Baby and Don't Look Now, where it's about families and the relationships between people and families and how those go bad, and then supernatural, horrific things start to go along with that. I think it took that idea, but it did it in a totally new way. It really focused on the mom, played by Toni Collette, and gave her this incredible performance to play this character. And she's very sympathetic, but she's kind of, losing her mind throughout the whole thing. But you're with her, even as she's just starting to do and say horrible things. And then the son, who is just kind of this selfish kind of guy that you don't really, he's just like almost a throwaway character at the beginning. He gets drawn into this thing, and you feel so much for this guy by the end of it. It really is. You can kind of almost feel that this is a story about a family. Then if you've ever had experience with, dysfunction and problems in your own family, you can kind of see some of that in this. And I think that's what a lot of the great horror movies can do. They take real life stuff and reflect that through this genre. And it's a way to kind of re-experience and think about those things, but do it in a way that's a little removed because it's a horror movie. So it's not like too close up. You can kind of like look at it in a different way. And I think secretly this movie has one of the greatest villains ever, who is very slowly revealed, which is Grandma. I think Grandma is one of the great horror movie villains ever, and the way that they use her sparingly, because she dies at the beginning of the movie, and then you start to realize what she was doing, what she was a part of, and then the reveal of certain photographs at a certain point is highly chilling. And man, Grandma, she's something. So yeah, there's a lot to love in this movie. And this movie, it had to do a lot to beat out a lot of other movies for me, and it really is up there for me. And I get some people don't love it as much. These movies, these indie kind of movies, can be an acquired taste sometimes, but for me, this one really has it all. Yeah,
Hereditary. I got into a press screening of this, and I was really begging to get into it, and because I had heard at like South by Southwest or wherever it was that this thing had blown up and people were just blown away by it. And Toni Collette, I mean, she gives the performance of her lifetime, and no love come the Academy Awards because they do not recognize horror performances or anything like that, which is ridiculous.
Maybe 5 times in the history of the Oscars has horror gotten any recognition.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, Toni Collette is so good in this movie. Ari Aster, though, is this director. He's got 2 movies under his belt. And I'll tell you right now, this guy is the master of shocking you. Your jaw is literally down to the ground when that little girl gets decapitated out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Ann Dowd, which you all probably remember if you watch The Handmaid's Tale, she's just like this medium.
She's the Leftovers.
Yeah.
My favorite shows.
I don't watch The Leftovers, so I didn't know.
She's so good in The Leftovers.
She's
oh my God.
so good in The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
But she's like this medium, and you're like, okay, she's this medium. And then she's got this whole agenda.
It's so great. That whole reveal is so good.
What the heck is going?
It's so good.
The script is so airtight. I mean, you do not see this stuff coming. The script is so great how the dialogue fits in and all the characters play their parts. Gabriel Byrne from The Usual Suspect. Haven't seen him in anything in years. Damn, he's in this. And he's like, what the heck is going on around here?
The poor dad.
The poor dad, And like you said, Alex Wolff goes through a whole a whole
Dude,
daggone.
he was surprisingly real good.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, you might know him from Jumanji.
Mhm.
If you haven't seen Jumanji, this movie is so freaking good. When I talk, and I'm going to keep using this term, the renaissance of the horror genre. It's movies like this. It follows a couple other movies I'm going to be talking about. That you're just like, this is what I'm talking about with horror. When all these horror gurus back in the 60s and 50s and 70s came up with these original concepts, and then all of a sudden that stuff became like old hat. Now we're getting new and different and original kinds of stories. And have we gotten the family traumatic story before? Sure we have, but not like this. We have.
They built on it.
I also love how there's certain scenes in this movie where the family dynamic and the family dialogue seems so realistic.
Yeah,
like it doesn't seem hammy or forced, especially that the dinner table scene. Tony Collette just finally lets it all go on Alex Wolff's character, and you're just like, you feel for her, and then you're like, well, why are you being so hard on her at the same time? It's like you're conflicted at points in this movie. Yeah,
because you do care about you really do care about every one of these characters. You don't start caring about, but as the movie goes on, you care about every one of these characters more and more and more. You're like, oh, no. And then when something happens, you're like, oh no. You're like, no, not that person. No, not that. You're like, and that's what great horror does. And I'll tell you right now, I didn't have a lot of jump scares. There wasn't a lot of jump scares because I don't get scared. But there was so much psychological scares that really got into my head. And that's what makes for great horror, in my opinion. So Hereditary. Oh my God, what a great
so
film.
Good.
Can't wait. I have an idea. I know. I've been informed that I think I know what Ari Aster's next movie is going to be. But I've been told not to say anything, so I'm not going to say anything.
Oh wow, can't wait for that.
I'll let you guys know what it is after. And this is just a hearsay what some people told me.
Movie gossip.
Yeah, so we'll find out. We'll see if it's actually happening or not. All right, Jeremy. We talked about Hereditary for quite a while. Number 4.
All right. So my last pick, I was covering the 80s. Now I'm going to jump forward and cover the 90s. And I don't know if you guys have this or not, but I'm going to skip the preamble for now and just say it is the Blair Witch Project. Does anyone have this one?
I do not have it, but I'll talk about
honorable
mention, thoughts on the movie.
Okay, so again, we talked about personal experiences with movies. When this movie came out, it was about 19 or 20, and I had like a college girlfriend at the time, and there was this was in the early days of the internet, and there was a whole like internet campaign where you could go on and learn about the Blair Witch, and they had little videos of like locals, all this marketing that they did, and they made it all seem real, like this was a documentary. So they were actually laying this whole narrative that this wasn't a horror movie. This was like a documentary, and that this footage was actually found, like they tell you in the movie. So we were literally driving, me and my girlfriend at the time were driving in the car to go see this movie, and we're having a conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, I heard so much about this movie. This is going to be cool. She's like, well, yeah, it's all real, right? I'm like, whoa, wait a second. You really think it's real? And she's like, yeah, it is, right? I'm like, no, it's a horror movie. But they had all that stuff on the internet. I went on the website and saw it all. I'm like, I'm telling you, this is. I know the names of the filmmakers. I read it internet. They made this on a low budget, and it got picked up. And they're like, I don't think so. So she still was like holding to this is real when we went into the movie, and that was like, and it was in an art theater. Like it hadn't, when it first came out, they had no idea what they had on their hands, so they just were putting it in like your local art theater or like your low budget theater, and it was completely packed. It was so packed there were people laying in the aisles. That is what like the anticipation was for this movie in '99. And yeah, it's like nothing we'd seen before. It's the very early days of found footage movies. So the idea that it's about these college students that went out in the woods and filmed this on their own cameras, and gradually they're out in the woods in Maryland studying this like thing about they heard about a witch, and they get lost, and the woods are like the geography is all off. And that in itself is somebody who likes to go hiking, go on trips in the mountains and stuff. That's pretty terrifying in and of itself. You don't even need to put anything like really supernatural on. Just the idea of being lost like that and having the environment turn against you is terrifying. But then things like one of them disappearing and then them finding a thing with teeth in it. It's like all these little things on such a low budget with film, the actors actually filming themselves. It just created something new that we hadn't seen before. And it's like, have there been scarier found footage movies since then? Yes. But this one, having lived it, I can't begin to tell you the impact this movie had for people when it came out. They'd not seen anything like it. And I think even today, it still is unique and has an impact all its own. And it really means a lot to me personally. And if I'm talking about 90s, like I can't think of another movie, indie type horror movie that it did what the Blair Witch Project did.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, you hit the nail on the head. It created the found footage genre. I mean, everything you saw after, it was because of the Blair Witch Project. And let me tell you, I live in Central Florida. Well, guess who made this movie? Students at the University of Central Florida.
Oh, that's cool.
Made this movie for maybe like $23,000.
Yeah, it was like $25,000, something like that. Yeah.
It was like, I mean, it's unheard of today. And it was like Jeremy said, it was playing at indie theaters. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just became this giant hit.
Yeah, they had to put it in They had to put it in the multiplexes. It was there was such a word on it, and then it was one of the biggest hits of the year.
Yeah,
it made a lot of money in the multiplex after that.
Yeah, and it was one of these things. It was just a phenomenon, and it was so new for the time, and so different for the time, and so original for the time. And that's what I'm saying. You go back to the 90s. There's nothing original about horror movies in the 90s. This is the only thing that was really just groundbreaking and different. Because how you judge horror is this. It creates a genre. Well, this created a genre of horror within the horror genre. It's called found footage. And have we got a lot of crappy found footage movies? Yeah, we have.
It's kind of run its course at this point, but
yes, yes. And we even got I loved the marketing campaign. Like, just one of the things about a great movie is if they market it right, where you're like blown up, like, oh wait, I gotta see that, whatever that commercial is, whatever that internet thing is, whatever that trailer is, that teaser. Well, they tried it a couple years ago at Comic-Con, and it was the Woods. They had this whole thing set up a couple years ago at Comic-Con called The Woods. And then when the screening happened, they took away all the Woods, and it was the Blair Witch. And it's like,
the new one.
But once you knew the Blair Witch and you seen it already, it wasn't gonna be something new and original to you. And it wasn't new and original with the.
It showed how much people still love this prop, like how much that original movie meant to people when they revealed that, and it still had that impact for people. Oh, it's the Blair Witch. It isn't just some random Woods movie. You know, this movie really left an impression. And, you know, I just wanted to say on what you were saying, horror at the time was Scream and movies like that. It was, we're kind of over it now, and we're making horror movies, but we're joking about it at the same time. Like, it's almost like horror is done, and we're kind of laughing at it while we're doing it. And then this movie comes, and it's like, no, we're taking it very, very seriously, and there's no joke, and this is some real you know. And it was a real shock, you know, and that kind of pose to come right out of that Scream era.
No, and Scary Movie and Scream is like, give me a break. Hunter, you got any thoughts on the Blair Witch Project? No, don't tell me you haven't seen it.
I get that it's not for everybody. It's totally cool, Hunter. I mean,
I've seen it.
You're younger, and like I said, a lot of this is your own experience, and I get that it doesn't have the same impact for people now that it used to.
I'm not going to try to hate on it because I know that you both really, really do enjoy it. This movie came out when I was 1 year old. If that says anything about how young I am, but I watched this movie. God, a few years back, and for the first time, and I did not like it one bit.
Yeah.
People were screaming, Hunter. People were literally screaming. I mean, it was one of the most craziest things.
I respect what it did with bringing back, you know, introducing found footage and the marketing campaign behind it, things like that. I respect that. The movie, to me, wasn't a great movie.
Yeah.
And that's what I was watching it more of, can I, one, take this movie seriously enough to watch it continue, and one, I couldn't, because all the little movement of the rocks and things like that, it just made me laugh. And again, it
think about it. It's 25 years old now. It's
exactly
25 years old now.
It really depends on
20.
For you guys, it came out at a time where you had memories about it, and you were around when the marketing was huge and things like that. I wasn't. You know, I watched it when the remake of Blair Witch came out. So I just didn't grow up in that mindset. I grew up with stuff like Paranormal Activity, which to me kind of did the exact same thing Blair Witch did back in '99. It did it back in 2008. So that's what I kind of grew up with, was the Paranormal Activity craze, things like that. But to me, I couldn't get into the movie because I knew everything about it. I knew it wasn't real, and they tried to play it up like it's real, things like that. So maybe it's just me getting in my own head, but as someone who loves horror so much, to see really not great actors, you know, portraying this like it's real, it just seems real campy to me.
Well, I mean, not to get off on a tangent here, but there's a movie that came out in the 70s that I have friends. I was born in 74, so I didn't see this movie in the theaters. I saw it about a decade later, maybe 15 years later.
You may not, I don't know where you're going with this, Dan, but you may be talking about something I'm going to talk about.
Oh, okay. All right, man. I won't talk about that. Never mind. I'm not going to talk about it.
I heard 74 and my hackles went up.
All right. I will. You know what? I'm not going to say anything. If never mind. I'll wait till Jeremy brings it up, and then I'll have a conversation about it, because it kind of ties into your thoughts on the Blair Witch Project, Hunter. So that was.
And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I just want to play it safe.
That's fine. That's fine. So that brings us. That was Jeremy's number 3, and we already talked about my number 3 because it was the same as Hunter's number 3. Hereditary. So now we're going to go to Hunter's number 2.
My number 2 is Ari Aster's second movie, Midsommar.
All right, so I had that at number 4. So, and Jeremy, do you have Midsommar?
I do not.
Okay, so we can talk about that now.
Dude, I was blown away by this movie. Seeing Hereditary, my expectations were so high for the next Ari Aster film, and he delivered so much. I think I like this a bit more than Hereditary because, yes, I love the characters and the family dynamic of Hereditary, but I can put myself into the characters in Midsommar. Like, I could be one of the characters, and to me, while it's not real scary, it's more intense because I can put myself in the story. I couldn't put myself in the story of the family dynamic because I don't have that family dynamic. But I could be one of the characters. I could be on that trip with them, and then shit starts going down. And at least, like, there's a huge shocking scene, which, again, spoilers, when everyone starts flying off the bridge. Oh my God, my mouth was dropped during that moment.
Well, two people.
But yeah, it's a tradition, so multiple people have done it. But dude, like, Florence Pugh is a star. She had a star-making year in 2019, and it really showed here in Midsommar. A very emotionally pulling opening scene. Everything about this movie is incredible.
Yeah, I had it at number 4. I'll tell you, when you're watching a movie, first of all, you get like something that shows up at a film festival, and the word starts getting out. Oh, you got to see Midsommar. And so it's not coming out to July 4th or whatever, July 3rd. You're like, man, I got to see this early. I got to see this as soon as possible. And then when you finally get to see the movie, and you don't even have time to sit down and get your popcorn and your soda. One of the most jaw-dropping things I have ever seen in any movie I have ever seen happens in the first 5 minutes of the freaking movie.
Yep.
You're like, Ari Aster did it again with jaws on the ground, just like he did with Hereditary. And, you know, it kind of has this like cult thing going on. And the thing, what's funny about it is, and it's not funny, but it's funny, is it's this beautiful. The posters are all her with this thing on her head with flower, and it's a beautiful day out. It's a beautiful country in Sweden, and they're in this camp, and it's got the great architecture, and then the stuff that goes on is just ridiculous. What the F is going on here? And she goes through this whole arc in this movie from the beginning, then to this whole camp where her and her friends end up going, and she ends up getting involved in a cult. But the movie takes place during the day. Pitch beautiful, sunny, beautiful day in the Swedish Alps or wherever. You're like, oh my God, how can all this horrific stuff take place during this gorgeous location? And
it's actually more horrifying because you can see what's happening. It's in the middle of the night.
Yeah, instead of being dark and spooky, and it's daylight, and you never see that. You never see horror movies that take place in the broad daylight like that. And the crazy stuff that happens in this movie is just out there, in a hit. But I mean, it is you have to be able to take, because this movie has some scenes that are just really for your stomach. I'm telling you right now, if you have a bad stomach and you get queasy, there's some stuff that is just not for everybody.
No.
And Ari Aster did it again. He's 2 for 2, in my opinion. I can't wait for his third movie. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on Midsommar?
Yeah, I went to see it. I think it was opening weekend, and yeah, it's an incredibly directed movie. This guy, I think visually with each movie, he's just growing as an artist and doing, really amazing things. Like you've said, the idea of doing it all in the daytime like this, except for like a couple little scenes here and there.
Like
it's incredible, and it somehow makes it more claustrophobic because it's just like, you've got this little area that they're in, and then it's just blue skies on the horizon, and it's like you're just stuck in that world. It's not like, maybe if you run off screen somewhere, you can get away somewhere. You can see the horizon, and it's just, and they basically, this is where they live. This is their culture, and you've come there as a guest, and now it's like, you can't, now that you're there, and it just becomes more claustrophobic as it goes on. I mean, I think the standout of the movie is Florence Pugh. I think her and the director created this character and the emotional arc of her just, already at the beginning of the movie being in a horrible, horrible situation. And then just to go through, it's almost like the movie is kind of a very twisted, like almost psychological, her like dealing with her own stuff. Like all this stuff is like a reflection of her psyche and her letting out her demons and her feelings and all this stuff. And this crazy cold around her is like expressing all of that. So yeah, I think it's a really good movie. For me, it's a bit of a step down from Hereditary for a couple reasons. One of them being, I thought that all of the characters were very sharply drawn in Hereditary, and I feel like in this one, he put a lot of the attention into the main character, Florence Pugh, and some of the supporting characters are kind of not as well drawn. I feel like there's kind of the jerk comic relief friend, and then there's the boyfriend who's just kind of a dude, and there's not a lot to him, and some other characters that are there and then just kind of disappear. And I do think you kind of have to, like people are killing themselves and stuff, and it's like, oh, we're just gonna stay here and we're just gonna keep watching this thing because we're writing a paper or something. Like you kind of have to, kind of go along with that a little bit. So for me, it didn't quite get to Hereditary, and I quite don't fully read it as a horror movie either. I mean, you can put it in that genre, but for me, it's more into that like psychological, trippy sort of thriller genre. And the fact that another thing, mushrooms. Another thing I was going to say, that they're based on psychedelics for a lot of the movies. It has that trippy Ken Russell-y kind of feel to it more than just a straightforward horror movie. So, but it really is. I still think, despite all that, I think it's one of the best movies of last year and definitely worth mentioning today.
And then, go ahead, Hunter.
I also love the fact of how Ari Aster gives you a false sense of hope in this movie.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, everything's gonna be okay, and blue skies, and clouds, and then it's just like, no, everything just keeps going down.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, it does kind of give you a false sense of like, oh, this beautiful world we're in, and we're over here, we're gonna go camping, and we're gonna write about this is kind of society, and then the society is a cult, and they like to maim and kill people and kill old people too. I mean, if you get old, don't go there.
No, no, you're a time.
No, but yeah, I mean, once again, the renaissance of horror. I mean, wow. These are the movies that we're talking about. I mean, the last 5 years has been incredible. And this is last year, Hereditary is the year before that. It follows like 5 years ago or something like that. So, I mean, and this is just like 3 movies we've talked about. There's so many more that we could bring up, but they're not technically indie, so we can't bring them up right now. We'll talk about them down the road, though. We'll get topics down the road for those. All right, so that was
his number 2.
Number 2 and my number 4. So we're going to go to Jeremy's number 2.
Yeah, for my last 2, I feel like I'm going to have more old movies that don't do it for Hunter, but that's okay. I'm a film history guy, and I love these movies, and I feel
love you, Jeremy.
For me, these movies still hold up, and they changed everything, when they came out. So I don't feel bad having them. It's just you're going to be coming from different places on these things. So my number 2 is my pick for the 1960s, and kind of a dual pick because it's a 60s movie, and it's also a movie that created a genre. And that is George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which I'm guessing no one has. So
no, but
I don't have it.
This is the movie that created the zombie genre as we know it. Before that, zombies were basically something you would see in like black magic movies about like the Caribbean and like voodoo priests and stuff like that. And Richard, that was kind of what the zombie was. And then this young filmmaker, just kind of doing his own thing, making a low budget movie, came up with this idea that no, zombies could be anybody, something happens, every person that dies comes back and they want to eat your flesh. And it was that simple little premise and this low budget little movie that it created a genre that has had such an impact. I mean, the zombie craze started to kick in the 70s, and then it continued, and it went through the 80s, 90s, and then even had a bit of a renaissance because, like, we had the remake of the second Romero film, Dawn of the Dead. We had that remake in the 2000s, and that movie kind of kicked off, and then we had 28 Days Later, which is kind of the similar sort of thing, and then of course, the biggest cultural thing is The Walking Dead, the TV series and the comic, which, is such a huge phenomenon, especially in its first few years of being on the air. So, I mean, this movie has a very long impact, but it isn't just that. It isn't just that it created this idea of the zombie. It's also the idea that you could make a low budget black and white horror movie like this. And there were low budget movies before, but not like this that terrified people as much as this movie did. Not that had the kind of serious tone that this movie had. This did something new to kind of really cauterize what an indie horror movie can be, and that the filmmaking of it, the ingenuity of it, all of that, I think also has a tremendous impact on top of the zombie part of it. And then the third thing is the idea, and this had been done, but I don't think it really hit until this time period, the idea that you're using a horror genre or a genre like that to get across a social message. And this movie is not just about the dead coming back to life, but he went the extra mile of making the hero in this movie an African-American guy, trapped in a house, at a certain point in the movie with a white woman, and they're trying to fight off the zombies. And that, I'm not going to go too far into spoilers just in case, but there's a tragic misunderstanding at the end of the movie. And with that ending, he's telling you everything you need to know about the 60s, about where we were as a society. And he's doing it because these people were trapped with zombies. And the idea that you could use a horror movie for that is so groundbreaking. And I mean, yeah, like Hunter said, you go back to these old, the 80s, 90s movies, you're going to see some cheesy acting. You know, these are they're local actors, basically. They're their buddies that they get to be in these movies. You're not going to see the best acting and stuff like that. And some of the special effects, I mean, it's obviously they're just, you know, putting dirt and corn syrup on people, making them go, ah, and stuff like that. But if you buy into it, it really, I think it still does work. I think the scene where the little girl dies and her body's in the basement and the mother goes down and the little girl gets her, that's still potent to me. Like, that's always going to have an impact no matter what. And the idea that this guy made this movie back that long ago, I mean, this is over 50 years. You know, it's crazy. I think, to me, this is way up there. And are there scarier zombie movies? Are there more high-tech zombie movies? I mean, have we seen it done to a higher degree later? Yes, but there's something special about the original.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeremy. I only saw it maybe a year or so ago. I mean, I hadn't seen it up until then. And I had seen it a long time ago, and I hadn't seen it again since. I saw it again like last year, and because I did it for a show that I was doing.
Yeah.
And it really has great messages, and it uses the zombie genre to tell those messages, or the horror genre. And a lot of times you will get some messages in horror movies, and those are the really good ones, when you can get a message in there, and between killing and maiming and raping and doing all this kinds of stuff that these monsters and people are doing within these movies, and get a message about society. And that's exactly what this movie did. It really had a great message, especially that they have an African-American, like you said, as the hero in a time when it wasn't good to be black in this country, needless to say. Or
it was in the thick of civil rights. This was the year. It was released the year that Martin Luther King was assassinated. I mean, that just tells you what was going on, you know, with this movie and what this guy was kind of trying to say and deal with through, you know, an art form.
Yeah. And that's what movies do. They really can tell a story and get you involved and invested in the story and the characters if it's done well. And this guy, I don't think there will ever be a zombie movie as good as Dawn of the Dead. Is it Dawn of the Dead? Or
this is Night of the Living Dead. Dawn of the Dead is tremendous as well. That came out almost a decade later in '78, and it has a totally different, very valuable message about consumerism, you know, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, those two movies together, but are both, either I think could be on this list, but you know, I kind of had to go with the original. But either one, you can't go wrong with either Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, that's what I meant to say, Night of the Living Dead. I mean, but and I have a kind of a sore spot about this, but I'm not going to get into it right now. It has nothing to do with it. That's all right.
I got kind of jobbed in a debate about
you were on a debate show
about this. The person that I was going up against didn't even know what they were talking about with the movie they were talking about. They hadn't even seen it, and I'm over there giving all this waxing poetic about Night of the Living Dead because I had seen it. And then I lose a point on that, and I end up losing the match. I'm like, how can I lose? I know what I'm talking about. I didn't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, this was
night falls on you.
Hashtag Justice for Dan today. We talked about how great this movie is and got you some retribution there, so we're all good.
But I don't like to name names, so maybe the person.
No, we'll just leave it in the past.
Yeah. So, but that was your number 2. My number 2, I guess I kind of screwed up on this, Jeremy, because I went foreign film again.
No, like I said, you can go foreign film. That was just my thing for me. But if you wanted to do that, that's totally fine.
And another in the Renaissance. I'm going the last 5 years. I got like 3 movies on my list from like the 4 movies from my list from the last 5 years.
Half of them are probably A24 films.
No, not half of them, just 2 of them. I already named the 2. But another movie that, I mean, I was just completely just blown away by is called The Babadook. I don't know if anybody saw the
I watched
Of
that one.
course, it's the
Yeah,
greatest.
Hunter, you don't have that, do you?
No, I have to watch it.
The Babadook is from director Jennifer Kent, and it's basically about a mother.
You have
and
to watch this, Hunter. This movie's so good.
a mother and son dealing with a presence in their house, a nightmare. Children.
Tell them how it gets out. What releases it, Dan? It's such
I
a
don't wanna
unique setup.
I don't want
All
to.
right.
I don't want to kind of spoil it, but it deals
All right.
with a mother and a son who lives in a house, and then there's this presence that happens in this house. And this little guy, kind of, the Babadook, gets released, and they have to deal with him. And it's from director Jennifer Kent, and this is another new director. She's got 2 movies under her belt. Last year's The Nightingale. Oh my God. If you haven't seen The Nightingale, I highly recommend. But the Babadook, it just kind of took like a monster and made it kind of like a psychological kind of thing. It mixed psychological horror and monster horror and kind of the mother taking care of her child kind of thing. It mixed like 3 different horror tropes together to really make an original, different movie. And it's from Australia. In case I didn't mention that, Jennifer Kent's an Australian director, and this movie's from Australia. And it's just so original and so different. Once again, it came out during the Renaissance, the last 5 or so years of the horror genre. It's just, there's so many just great, original, different horror movies.
From 2010 to 2019 has been the best decade of horror, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, there's some great horror movies going back decades.
Well, yeah. But I'm talking about
5 or 6 years have been really, really great.
Like consistently great horror movies.
Yeah.
I would argue there's a lot of crap too, but what are you gonna do?
Oh, there is.
I mean,
I've already seen some horror this year and every week every other week a new movie it comes out and you're like, oh, Brahms Boy 2, oh, give me a break. And then Fantasy Island, I'm gonna see that on Tuesday.
Oh, you're going to see that? Oh, dude,
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet. I wanted to see it last week, but I'm gonna see it next week. I'm seeing The Invisible Man. So there's every couple of weeks is something new coming out. So there's gonna be some bad horror movies. But then you get these gems, 3 or 4 gems every year, the last 4, 5, 6 years. And one of those gems, there'll be people that probably say this is the best movie of the last horror movie of the decade, maybe even better than Midsommar or Hereditary. It is so good and so original, so different.
I might have to check it out then.
Yeah, you have to. You got to see the Babadook. There's the thing about it is there's a little bit of humor in there too. She throws a little bit of humor in there too. So, all right, Jeremy, you got any thoughts? You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I know you don't want to spoil it, but it was in the marketing, Dan. So I have to at least mention this has to do with a creepy storybook, like a kid's book.
Yeah,
and that's such a unique idea to kind of set up something horrible happening. I think the actress in this movie, her name is Essie Davis. She's like Toni Collette Hereditary level. It's one of the most incredible performances you'll ever see in a horror movie. She started to pop up in other stuff. She was actually in the Game of Thrones for a few episodes. There was a dramatic troupe of actors that were acting out Cersei and all that stuff, and she was the actress that played Cersei. So yeah, that was Essie Davis from the Babadook. So she's already kind of, her career kind of took off from this movie, and it's cool because a lot of times there'll be kind of this idea that the only really great horror movies are R-rated and stuff, but you can make really good PG-13 and PG horror movies. We've had a lot of great ones, and this one is PG-13, and I watched it with, my young stepson, and he was terrified, and we yelled and we screamed. We had a great time. There was a couple little moments here and there that are a little more adult, but for the most part, it's just this mom and her kid, and anybody can really kind of get drawn into it, and it's a really great. I think despite not being an American movie, I think it's a very accessible movie that a lot of people can enjoy, and I easily could have put this one in my top 5. like I guess I was kind of Australia for me was still kind of counting as foreign, but I could really go back and forth with this other Hereditary from my number 5. Could go either way, so it's a really great pick, really fantastic, Dan.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we're going to everybody's number 1. I think we got down to the number 1s there, Hunter. Can't wait to hear.
Can we do some honorable mentions real quick?
No, we'll
do that after.
Oh, after. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my number 1 is probably my favorite horror movie of all time. Didn't realize it was an indie horror movie till now, but it's 1978's Halloween. I mean,
excellent.
There's this whole movie.
You made me very, very happy, Hunter, because it was either going to be this or another movie, and I picked the other movie. So I'm really happy because it really should be on the list. So I'm glad that you did that.
Dude, Halloween is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. From the music, the score, the directing, the young cast of unknowns at the time. Now, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis is the original Scream Queen. Just everything about this movie. Michael Myers is iconic. Just how realistic the teen dialogue felt. Kind of like with Scream in the 90s. It felt like real human dialogue. So it drew you into the characters and you cared more about the actors and the characters and their fate. So when Michael Myers did come, it felt more intense. It felt like you wanted them to escape. They weren't just extra bodies lying around. That's what I really love, is that Carpenter was able to craft just this perfect horror movie when it comes to the music, when it comes to you caring about the characters, and you really crafting one of the most iconic horror villains in history in Michael Myers. So yeah, it's my number 1.
Jeremy, I'm going to skip over you for your number 1 because my number 1 is Halloween.
There you go. Good job, guys.
I absolutely love this movie. When you think about the slasher genre, to me, I know people like Jason, or they like Freddy, or they like Texas Chainsaw, Leatherface. My go-to in the slasher genre is Michael Myers. I just feel like it's more grounded in reality more than those other things. Like a guy can escape an asylum and come start killing people. That can happen in any town, in any state, in any country, all over the world. It could happen. Where some of these other things, it's kind of a little bit exaggerate. It's a little bit more exaggerate, even though, quote, I think Texas Chainsaw is based on a real guy.
Ed Gein.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just feel like Michael Myers and the iconic knife and the trivia question, of course, is, it's William Shatner mask that they did. And it's like that's classic trivia question. But I'll tell you what, one of the things that really made this movie great for me is the music. And John Carpenter did it all. He edited, he did the music, he directed it. I mean, this is one of those when you're trying to do everything you possibly could because you didn't have any money. Oh, I'm going to do it. And it was just iconic. The music in if you do not know that music, you just are not a movie fan, because that is some of the most iconic music in the history of movies. And a few years ago, they came out with a reboot of Halloween, and there was these stand-ups. If you go to the movie and you open the door and I wanted to get that damn stand-up, and they threw it away. I wanted to get that so bad. But I love Halloween, and I'll tell you right now, the one from a couple of years ago, oh my God, I can't wait. They're going to be doing two in the next year.
I love that 2018 one too. I think
2018 was so good.
And they got rid of the crappy ones, and they kind of took it in a direction, and it took another comedian, Danny Boyle, Jordan Peele.
David Gordon Green.
David Gordon Green.
Danny McBride. I meant Danny Boyle.
McBride.
They kind of have a sense for this genre for somehow, even though they're comedians, which is really weird, Yeah. But I love that version of Halloween. I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I just love that film. I could watch that film and never be sick of it. So I had Halloween. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on Halloween?
I mean, If I didn't know for 1,000% that at least one other person was going to have it, I would have had it. That's the only reason that, I decided to go with something else that I kind of felt probably wasn't going to get represented unless I, gave it its due myself. But, you can't deny Halloween. And it's got such an amazing backstory where he was this, in up and coming kind of filmmaker. He made this really cool movie called Assault on Precinct 13, which I strongly recommend if you haven't seen it. It's a great indie kind of action thriller. And they basically were like, hey, we have this idea to do, a horror movie at Halloween where a guy's killing babysitters. It's called the Babysitter movies. Why don't you do it? Yeah. And it should have just been a throwaway movie that didn't do anything. But because it was John Carpenter and he had some great ideas about how to make it, and he put all of his filmmaking talent, like you said, editing and doing the music and the way that he filmed it and a lot of the tracking shots and everything that he did and things in the background and using, because he's a big like Hitchcock fan, so he used a lot of like, Hitchcock type techniques in it. It just became this whole other thing that it was never even supposed to be. And you'll see that when you go back into film history, there'll be they have no idea what what the lightning in a bottle that they have when they're making it. And then, and then look at like a movie. Yeah. A movie like Jaws, that was, it was going to be a huge failure. Like nothing went right making it, that it was going to be the end of Spielberg's career. And then it became Jaws, so it's amazing how these things can happen. Hollywood, what can you say? And I think I really like the franchise. I think some of the sequels are good, but it had kind of gone off the rails, and they tried the whole Rob Zombie thing we don't really need to talk about too much. But then bringing it back in 2018, going kind of back to what the original was, throwing out everything the sequels had done and starting over. And now we're getting two more that they're working on, which I'm really excited about. It's just awesome time to be a Halloween fan.
One comes out this year, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Halloween Lives?
Yeah.
Halloween Kills.
They're filming them both at the same time. One's going to come out this year. One's going to come out next year. We're going to get
exactly
2 more Halloween movies in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
We'll see. Hopefully they're good,
And they're bringing, like not too much spoilers, but they're bringing back a couple other characters from the original, like the Tommy, the boy that she was babysitting in the original film. He's going to be a character in the next one. So they're continuing to kind of go back to the original film and pull stuff out because there's so much there that you can kind of dig into.
You can pull out the great parts of the older movies.
Yeah.
Back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's great about reboots. You still have the original, but you can do something different with the reboot, or mine a lot of the different stuff that they had and maybe create something original and new.
Yeah.
But you still have the original. That's, not to quote somebody, if you don't like the new thing, you still have the
old ones.
Yeah. You can appreciate those. So Jeremy, what is your number one?
Well, going kind of back to what you said, Hunter, about the last 10 years, like the 2010s is the best period for horror. I respect that. But for me personally, I think the best time for horror is the 1970s. I think the 1970s, you see some of the most intelligent, interesting, really scary horror movies, and there's so many great things. And again, if we were going to foreign horror, like you go to stuff like The Wicker Man and Suspiria and all of these films, it was just such a creative time because cinema in general was very creative then. This was like, you had the American kind of renaissance with these great filmmakers like Coppola and all these people just making the movies they wanted to make. And it was such a free, expressive time. And out of all of this came this guy in the South who was just like had an idea, I'm just going to make a movie about killers, and he decided to kind of go down and dirty with it and get a little more gross and do some things that haven't been done before. And I still think, the impact that this movie had is like no other. And though I love Halloween, there's something demented, twisted, and original about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974 that does it for me like few movies do. And I got to tell you, before I even talk about the movie, I'm just going to tell you one little story, kind of like the story I told about about the Blair Witch Project, how, you know, my girlfriend and I were going to see this movie and all of the stuff around it. Well, my mom and my grandmother decided one night, hey, we're going to go to the drive-in and see a movie. And they like going to like horror movies and stuff. They're like, why not? So they didn't even know what it was. They go to see this movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So my mom and my grandmother in the drive-in. So they drive home after the movie and they literally were frozen in the car. Like they couldn't get out of the car because Leatherface was going to be there. They just knew it. Mm-hmm. So they literally sat in the car for hours, just naughty, until they absolutely had to like go into the house to go to the bathroom. And then they like ran into the house out of the car. That's the kind of impact that this, because it felt like the way that he filmed it, it felt so real. It felt like the killers in this movie felt like they're just demented psychos. They're not like movie monsters. These are like crazy freaks that might be living in some podunk county somewhere that you happen to accidentally, you know, go down a road that you shouldn't go down. And there's this psychotic freak with a chainsaw, or, you know, and, you know, the idea of bringing cannibalism into this was a thing. This is something we've read about in history. Cannibalism isn't something they made up. Like, this is something that has happened. And, you know, so there's some horrible stories. You mentioned, you know, Ed Gein kind of being one of the influences for this, as he was for Psycho. Yeah, this movie really tapped into some real stuff and just took it to this grotesque, horrifying level. But the amazing thing, and the thing that a lot of people don't really realize, is in this movie there really actually isn't any gore. Like, all of the blood and all of the gore is off camera. Like, every time somebody gets chainsawed, the camera pans away and you hear it, but you don't see it.
There's no blood.
Yeah, Halloween very similar. You see some blood in Halloween, but for the most part, he doesn't revel in any actual gore. Yeah. So other than like a scene in this movie where a guy cuts his hand with a knife, that kind of sets up like that. It's such ingenious filmmaking, because right at the beginning of the movie, you see this guy, you know, bleeding, and it puts that image of blood and grotesquerie in your mind, and you carry that through you, even though for the rest of the movie, it doesn't show any of that. But, you know, you see, like, you go into the killer's house and you see the skulls and all the stuff in there, and it's horrifying. And then, for me, the best part of the movie, it's still, for me, one of the greatest scare scenes ever. And it's like, nobody ever talks about it, but it's so great, is the girl, you know, they've killed most of her friends, and she finally escaped. She's able to get away from from Leatherface, and she's running down the street. And the guy that sold them gas when they were coming by, he's like, oh, come in here. And he sits her down. And he's like, okay, I'm going to call the authorities. We're going to take you care of. And she's sitting down, and he's making barbecue, because they've been selling barbecue by the roadside. Like, they've been free barbecue stand when they were coming down there. And she looks in there, and there's something off about that barbecue. And right then you're like, oh, crap. No. It was one of the great, like, you know, scare moments. And there's just a lot of ingenious stuff in this movie from Tobe Hooper. And, you know, he went on to, you know, maybe direct Poltergeist, we're not sure, but he made some other really cool movies. He's a great, you know, filmmaker. Yeah. Yeah, he's the credited director. There's a lot of talk about it was actually Spielberg, but yeah, Tobe Hooper is the credited director. And yeah, it's just, you know, is Halloween maybe a slicker movie in a lot of ways? Like, again, there's some of the acting, local people, but this movie, there's just something about it. And they've tried to do sequels, they've tried to do remakes, and, you know, I like some of them, but I don't think any of them have that kind of handmade, crazy, you know, this is just a crazy person making a movie is what it feels like. It doesn't feel like a product. It feels very like a psycho got a camera and made a crazy ass movie, and you don't get that very often. And I think the 70s is a time where you got that kind of really special filmmaking, for better or worse. We get to some of the Italian stuff like Cannibal Holocaust, and it's like, do I want to see this? I don't think so. But, you know, Texas Chainsaw kind of, you know, opened the floodgates for a lot of that, for better or worse. And yeah, for me, it's my number one.
Hunter, do you got any thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
It's a good one. It's a very good one, Jeremy. I really love this movie. Reason, like, I had it in honorable mentions. The only reason why I couldn't put it in my list is, one, I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with the movie in particular. The only thing is, like, there's some edits that are weird, but again, it's it's pretty.
You'll see that a lot
Yeah.
when you go back to the movies. Then they were edited in the way that they were now.
But like as you said, the scares are really good. One of my favorite scenes in that movie is when we first get a look at Leatherface.
When he comes out of that is one of the great.
And then he gets out of the head and
just takes the guy behind the metal door. Incredible.
Oh.
And then I think you hinted at the dinner, the family dinner scene too. You never forget the family dinner scene.
No, there's
so
a lot of iconic scenes in this movie, especially the end where he's dancing with the chainsaw or whatever, which that wasn't in the script. The actor was told by Toby Hooper to just kind of fill up time.
Yeah.
And he decided just to like pretend like he's dancing with the chainsaw. And he
it's so good.
Hooper.
And then they send the camera in. All right, go in close, like circle around it with the camera. And it's amazing. I'm sorry, there's just one other crazy factoid I have to say about this movie that it delights me so much. There were 2 local indie movies made in Texas that came out in 1974, and they were both 2 of the highest grossing movies of the year. One is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the other is Benji. It's like the 2 polar opposite movies made by local Texas filmmakers that were huge, massive, like cultural milestones at the time.
That's
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you guys said a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I just feel like it's not really grounded in reality compared to Halloween, in my opinion. But that wasn't the movie I was going to talk about, Joe.
Oh, wasn't? All right. No, you said 74, and I was like, oh, no.
No, I was born in 74. What I was going to say, just to go off real quick here, is sometimes when you grow up and you get used to things, you get desensitized to things, Hunter, like you did for Blair Witch. Things just become whatever. Like right now, I don't get scared at horror movies. I really jump at a horror movie because I can watch the news every day, all day long, and I'd be more horrified what I see on the news than I do watching some people getting killed in a movie because I know it's fake. And in reality, the things that happen every day on the news, it's real. And you're like, wow, this is crazy. So when you see a movie, you're like, that's a bunch of baloney. It's not real. So I don't get scared. And when your own parent is scarier than these monsters and things you see on TV, then you have nothing to be scared about by watching movies. Yeah. But the movie I wanted to bring up real quick was The Exorcist, where I had friends that saw The Exorcist. They went to the theater and literally ran out of the theater screaming for The Exorcist. That's how iconic The Exorcist was for people. I saw it 25 years later, and I'm just sitting there like this.
Yeah.
And it just seemed campy and fake and just ridiculously stupid. To me,
I had the complete opposite reaction. I I watched it recently, like last year, and I think it still holds up as a iconic horror movie.
Yeah, and to me, it just seemed fake. The vomiting and the turning of the head and the words.
It didn't. The last time I watched it didn't have the same impact for me it did when I was younger. Definitely, I could definitely see the seams more. But like you can't deny, like the story I told about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the impact the Exorcist, the Texas Chainsaw Halloween, the impact those movies had in their time.
Yeah,
you
can't even imagine what it was like to see it then, because that kind of thing didn't exist before.
Yeah, no.
I mean, hell, without movies like Halloween and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we wouldn't have gotten the slasher era.
Exactly.
It's the slasher genre. We know that they created the slasher genre.
Yeah.
What I'm just saying is, you do get desensitized, like a movie that took place in 1975 or 76, and now we're in 2020. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
As if they were like, they do exorcism movies now, and they just don't hold water because you're just like, okay, exorcism, all right, big deal. You saw the original and it doesn't hold up to today, in my opinion. And then you see these. There was one, The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Good movie.
So good.
Very, very good. They did a great job with that. So
And the one other thing I would just say is, for me, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of still holds up because it's got this kind of sly, weird, off-kilter kind of sense of humor and a way of doing things. It's really unique. And even like now, I don't think there's any movie quite like it. Like, it's still kind of singular, has its own personality. So even if you don't think it's that scary, or, you know, you don't fully buy it, if you just look at the weird kind of personality he put into it, I think that's why for me it still kind of stands. And same like Halloween. Like, I don't think Halloween's the scariest movie ever, but it's got a mood and a vibe and the characters and stuff of it that still make you enjoy it, even if maybe something that came later is quote unquote scarier.
Yeah.
No, I agree. All right, so Hunter, got any honorable mentions real quick?
Yeah, I got a few. I got The Lighthouse. I know it's recent, but fantastically made movie.
Didn't know it was horror. I'll have to watch it with that in mind.
Nah, it's not horror.
It is kind of a horror movie in the same realm of like Midsommar. Paranormal Activity. Again, that's my era Blair Witch Project. So to me, I grew up with that, and it affected me in more ways than I did. Insidious. I love Insidious. I think it's such a good horror movie. Yep, I looked it up. It's not.
Okay, cool.
No, it's indie. It's indie. It got picked up. The sequel got picked up by studio year after that. The first one.
Excellent pick then.
Saw. I think James Wan did.
That was a tough. It was honestly between Saw and Blair Witch for me. Like, I was going back and forth between the two. That was a tough one to leave off.
Yeah, it was tough for me to leave Saw off. To be honest with you. I'm like, how do I get 6 in a list of 5?
Yeah. And then finally, I have The Witch, another A24 horror film, which The Witch
so close for me. Good. So that was neck and neck with Hereditary. Great film.
Yeah, I loved The Witch as well. Hunter. I mean, A24 is just killing it. I mean, they're just killing it.
Yeah.
I have it follows The Invitation, another very indie little movie.
Netflix, right?
Now,
Was that
guys,
I think that was a Netflix one.
It's a party. It's a movie that it's set in a house where these people get this invitation to come to this dinner party, and all hell breaks loose. And I'm telling you right now, you want to see some craziness? This movie, what is the name? He's in the movie, but he directed it, and he's a character actor. Oh, what God. Maybe he didn't direct it. Damn it, I can't think of the guy's name right now. I had The Strangers as well. We've already mentioned all the mines, but The Invitation. Check out The Invitation if you haven't seen it. I'll tell you right now, you'll be pleasantly surprised. Are you looking that up, Jeremy?
I'm trying. Yeah, just a second. Let me see.
Logan Marshall Green.
Is that it? Logan Marshall.
He's in it. It's actually directed by Karen Kusama.
Never mind. Good,
yeah, she's a really good filmmaker. Done some serious dramas and stuff like that. So she's
fantastic. I love.
Yeah, but Logan Marshall Green is the lead. Yeah, Michael Huseman from Game of Thrones. I might have to check that one out. That definitely.
Yeah.
Good.
It's a very. You'd be like, what the hell is this? And I know Jeremy's got a bunch, so we'll get
a ton. All right. I'm gonna kind of like rocket through all my honorable mentions here. Though really, what was really close to do for the 80s for me with The Evil Dead was a movie I really love. You're going to talk about Twisted, Reanimator. This is a movie based on H.P. Lovecraft from the 80s about bringing the dead back to life that goes into some directions you could never fathom. I saw that movie as a kid, which is not okay, but it definitely left an imprint on me. One of the greatest horror filmmakers ever, who started making a lot of indie movies in Canada, is David Cronenberg. And a couple of his early movies, which I think really still hold up, are The Brood with Oliver Reed, a really cool flick. Has an interesting idea to it that you can kind of get if you watch it. And then Videodrome, which is a movie with James Woods. It has to do with the idea of watching like horrible violence and how it gets into your psyche and infects you if you watch something, and it gets really surreal and goes to some really cool, interesting places, great visuals.
Of Sinister, right?
Yeah, definitely similar ideas, but very different movie. Totally different movie. Going back to the 70s movie I love that I think as much as Halloween kind of helped create the slasher genre is the original Black Christmas, another Canadian movie.
Yeah.
Actually the same director as A Christmas Story, believe it or not, Bob Clark. And this
Really?
is about sorority girls being killed by a killer on Christmas, and it's really well done. Yeah.
The new version, awful. Do not see it.
Yeah, I heard, and the one from the 2000s is so horrible too. That was such an insult to the original.
Wednesday, though, right?
Yeah, but the original is great. Okay, we're gonna go to kind of the slightly more modern era. A really cool movie that people don't know as much, but a really great horror director named Ty West. He did a movie called The House of the Devil, and this is a movie that's kind of inspired by 80s. It's got a real 80s vibe. A young girl struggling to pay her bills. She's a college girl. Sees an ad to babysit, and she goes to a house to be the babysitter for the night, and it's this couple. They're like, oh, we don't have a baby, and it just, so why am I here? And it kind of gets weird from there. And it takes place in the 80s. The House of the Devil. Yeah, I think it's like 08, 09, somewhere around there.
Yep,
really cool movie. And just look up Ty West. He's in some really interesting, cool movies. He's divisive, but I still think he's a really good horror filmmaker. Rob Zombie, I think his House of the Devil's Rejects is a really great, cool movie. I know it's not your cup of tea, Dan, but I think if you want kind of that extreme horror, that Southern Gothic kind of thing, he puts his own stamp on it, and I really do like that movie. I like House of a Thousand Corpses too, but I think his best, standout movie is The Devil's Rejects. The one that I like better than The Strangers is You're Next. I think You're Next is a really ingenious, cool home invasion movie that takes some interesting turns, and it kind of takes the whole home invasion thing and it flips it on its head in a really cool way. I really love that movie. And then real quick, I'm going to jump way back. One of the first indie film kind of studios was, I'm breaking the rule because it's England, but Hammer Horror, they made a lot of movies in the 50s and 60s, and they did their own version of Dracula, Horror of Dracula with Christopher Lee, which is maybe my favorite Dracula. So I just had to throw that out there. If we do go back to do foreign horror, I'll go back to that. And then the last one I want to mention is a whole other subgenre you can get into is comedy horror, like people mixing horror and comedy. And I think for me, it's so underrated and doesn't get its due, but one of the top 5 horror comedies of all time is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. That movie is so funny, but there's a lot of gore in it too, and it is really great. And Tyler Labine and Alan Tudyk are the 2 leads in that movie, and the whole premise of they're usually the bad guys in every horror movie. They're those guys, like the guys from Deliverance, the guys in the backwoods. But the twist is they're actually just good guys out to try to go on a fishing trip, and it's the college towny kids that are the real bad guys, and it switches the whole thing on its head. It is such a funny movie and really good. So there you go.
I actually have one more because I just realized that Netflix movies technically count as indie.
Yeah.
The Babysitter. I know it's not a great movie, but oh my god, is that movie so much fun?
I'll have to check it out.
Mick G he's divisive, but this movie is so much fun.
It's one of those movies, Jeremy, that'll piss you off. Let's just put it this way. You'll be watching it and you're like, okay. Oh, what the no. And that's you will literally do that, Jeremy. I'll be shocked if you don't do that. Hunter, where can you be found?
Yes, I have a movie review channel, Film Nerd TV, also Combat Wrestling Network, where we host combat wrestling trivia.
And Jeremy?
I'm at the Full Metal channel where we do movie trivia and a lot of different things there. So you can check me out there. I'm also Jeremy Paul Adams on Facebook and YouTube. I have my own channels and my own page. And I'm sure everyone that watches this is a fan of the Movie Trivia Schmodown, for which I'm a question writer. Be sure to always be watching. They're dropping some new matches for the new season's just getting started. And then we've got a big title match coming up. So check it all out.
And you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also, if you want to read anything that I have written, a lot of people don't like to read anymore. But if you feel like reading, you can go to a website called cinesportstalk.com. That's cinesportstalk.com, where I wrote plenty of movie reviews, movie articles, sports articles. I also currently write for a website called Disappointment Media, DISIPOINT SMEDIA, where I write movie reviews. I haven't written in a little while because I've been sick. And I just wanted to bring up one thing. Thank you to Mr. Jeremy Adams, who filled in for me for a couple weeks while I was sick.
My pleasure.
Did a very admirable job. And now I know who I go to if I need a replacement in the future. So for Hunter and Jeremy, wait a minute. Hunter, 5-1.
Oh, yes.
All right. Number 5, I have The Strangers. Number 4, I have It Follows. Number 3, Hereditary. Number 2, Midsommar. And number 1, Halloween 78.
Jeremy.
5 Hereditary, 4 The Evil Dead, 3 The Blair Witch Project, 2 Night of the Living Dead, and 1 The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And mine 5 is Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Midsommar is 4. Hereditary 3. The Babadook at 2. And number 1, Halloween. All right. On that note, now we get out of here. I always like to run down what we talked about. So there we go.